What if I told you that your brand new GPU is already going to be obsolete in no time? And that's the plan. Remember, when you buy a product, you expect it to either A, last a long time or have an upgrade cycle. GPUs are kind of like in a weird place because some people upgrade every single year. Other people think that it's something that should last for many, many years. And I kind of agree with you. It should be something that lasts a long time. But what if the company making the product is planning for it to be obsolete? You've heard this phrase before, the planned obsolescence, and that happens in many industries. It's not only GPUs. People will say that about Apple and about other devices, but there are products that really do last a very long time. Look at Toyotas, for example. They last a ridiculous amount of time. And then you look at something like modern technology, and some of it seems to be obsolete only after a year. Specifically, let's focus in on, of course, Nvidia and AMD, but more specifically Nvidia because they have much more control of market share and of the actual market. Look at the GPUs coming out now and compare them to something like a 1080 Ti. 1080 Ti, pretty ridiculous if you look at the amount of time that it lasted, being a pretty reasonable choice, especially recently. You could still use it to play like 1080p and do different things like that. It's a GPU that lasted a very long time because it was really far ahead of its time. And now let's hear a word from our sponsor, VIP-CDKdeals.com, a Windows 10 Pro CD key. Add to cart, you put in code CC20. This will also work on Windows 11. You want to go into your settings in Windows, change and adjust your CD key, click activate, and now let's go back to the video. And the reason why this topic is so important, specifically with Nvidia, is that they control what the hardware is going to be, right? Like the 1080 Ti. Then they also control the software experience. I mean, they're big into software. Look at all the AI stuff that they're doing. So that means that they have good implemented software. And when they have really good hardware, that's when it's a product that people really like and it lasts a long time. For example, you can have great hardware. Look at some other GPUs in the past, perhaps maybe with AMD or something like that, where the hardware was perhaps capable, but the software side was maybe missing certain things. So even if the hardware could last a long time, the software wasn't there to sort of make that connection. With Nvidia, typically it's been true that both have been very reliable. That's why they have the biggest market share. And then you take a look at some of the GPUs coming out now. For example, the RTX 4070, 4070 Ti, they have something that is obviously going to be a limiting factor. If not in the future, it already is in many cases. The VRAM, which I'm not the only one talking about this. If you guys watch Hardware Unboxed, they're pretty widely respected for all of the benchmarks that they do. They've been saying that VRAM is a serious issue and the 8GB GPUs are already in serious trouble. Stuff like a 3070 Ti, which is a high-end GPU that's pretty recent, we're not talking about something ancient, is already having trouble at 1440p with some of the latest games. And then of course, coming up with 12 gigabytes of VRAM, right now that appears to be literally the bare minimum for a high-end experience at 1440p if you want to turn on all of the eye candy, ultra, etc. If you're spending the amount of money on a GPU that these are asking for, like $800, in my opinion, you have the right to be able to turn on ultra and have all the eye candy. You can easily say, just turn off ray tracing and turn off ultra, just put it on medium or high, then you might as well then get a cheaper GPU, right? So that's why you have to view the price of the product in relation to the performance it's putting out. Even when people say, oh, a 70 class GPU shouldn't be able to do this or do that, don't look at it like whatever the GPU is. You have to look at it with the specific details. Look at the technical specs and the price that they're asking for the GPU. If they're asking $799 for a 4070 Ti, don't make the mistake of going off Nvidia's marketing. Nvidia is going to tell you that it's a 1440p GPU and it's a 4070 Ti, but look at the specs. Look at how much they limited a lot of not only the CUDA cores, but they also limited the VRAM, the memory bus, everything is very, very limited. You have to view it from that perspective. Then you look at some GPUs from previous years that have, in some cases, better specs than the new stuff, especially when it comes to the VRAM. And then you see that Nvidia is not only raising prices on these, what used to be sort of the mid-range GPUs like the 4070 and 4070 Ti, but Nvidia is also giving you less for these GPUs for the high price that you're paying. That's another way of sort of raising the price without you noticing it. If they give you inferior technical specs and hardware for the amount of money that it's at, they can call it whatever they want. They could call the 4070 Ti a 4090, but it doesn't make it the best high-end GPU. It just doesn't. Whatever they call it is irrelevant compared to what they're asking for and the technical specs. And something else that's super important, like I mentioned, they control the software, right? So they can influence developers to have more ray tracing in games, have stuff like DLSS 3. All of those things are going to have either a benefit or they're going to detract from the current GPU's performance. For example, things like high textures and ray tracing, those all eat up a significant amount of VRAM. And even if Nvidia isn't directly responsible for putting those in games, like you could say, okay, the developer will choose to add it or not. Of course, everybody wants to follow the newest trends. They want to have ray tracing. They want to have path tracing support. They want their game, especially if it's a AAA title, to be a technological marvel in certain cases. So it's naturally going to go in that direction. And then Nvidia, like they always have, they'll provide the tools for developers to implement these things with DLSS 3 and different things like that. And they're going to make developers' lives easier. And therefore, it kind of completes that cycle. They can, in a way, influence the amount of power and VRAM that a GPU is going to require. So knowing that, they can turn up the dial and therefore influence games in the future to have a significant amount of VRAM usage if they want. Even though at the end of the day, the developer is who chooses what they're going to put in their game, Nvidia can have a lot of influence over the technologies that go in newer games. And if they want to influence everything to make it so these games are going to be always very hardware intensive, especially with VRAM, that's what they're going to do. And on one side, they can plan. Nvidia is a smart company. They can sit down and plan and know, all right, this technology is going to be coming out next year because they know the pipeline of path tracing and ray tracing. And then this GPU is what we want to release, and it may use this amount of VRAM, this and that. They can plan and they could know, okay, we're going to release the next series, and then people are going to want to upgrade to take advantage of this. One of the biggest examples, look at DLSS 3. It's something that's only offered on RTX 4000 because technically Nvidia can say that RTX 4000 has the necessary hardware to be able to do DLSS 3, and it technically is true. If you try to do it on, an RTX 30 series, you can do it, but the experience won't be as good. But at the end of the day, that's something Nvidia can engineer in the new GPUs to make it so it's something that almost obsoletes the previous generation. Look at all the new games coming out with DLSS 3 now. It's definitely something Nvidia is pushing. They're not only pushing DLSS 3 support in different games, but they even use it in their marketing when a GPU comes out. Look at the 4070. I bet you they're going to say it's X amount faster than this other GPU. We're using DLSS 3. They're not going to use traditional rasterization because that difference isn't as impressive. If you use the difference with DLSS 3, which has the AI frame generation, it just looks much more impressive. It's like double the frame rate that you would get normally. So that's something that Nvidia can push. That's the marriage between hardware and software. And Nvidia not only has full control of that, they also have influence over the market, over people that make those decisions, like game developers. So therefore, they can sort of, in a way, plan for whatever GPU comes out now to last a certain amount of time because they know the future technologies that they want to implement, therefore requiring something else. For example, let's say path tracing ends up being, extremely daunting for GPUs, which it likely will. It's something that's going to be very hardware intensive. Possibly Nvidia, maybe next generation, will have DLSS 4, something that may only work at like RTX 5000 or something like that if you want the best experience. And after people are acclimated with that type of technology because of RTX 4000 and DLSS 3, it'll be something that Nvidia wants to just make sort of just work for people in the background so they don't have to say, oh, I don't want DLSS, I want real GPU performance. By then the general population will be used to having that AI sort of in their games, therefore making Nvidia's control of the situation much better. Now, is this a good or a bad thing? Obviously, if a product isn't the best that it could be, it's not a good thing. Like the 4070 Ti, they could definitely have some better specs in there, especially with the VRAM. While the performance is still going to be good at 1440p, it's not something wrong with the hardware itself. For the price Nvidia is going to charge for these GPUs, they do have these limitations that there's no way around it. They're there. You can run into these limitations now by playing current games that, let's keep in mind, every new game is basically unoptimized. That's the reality of the situation. And if you think that you're going to wait for a nicely optimized game to play, good luck. You're going to be waiting 2 or 3 years, something like Cyberpunk that's taking years to be optimized. That's the reality of the situation. And the better hardware that you have, the better hardware in your GPU, the better it's going to deal with unoptimized games. That's just the reality of the situation. Some things take down even a 4090. There's nothing you can do. But some things make a 4090 better than something like a 4080, for example, because it just has better specs, better VRAM, and it can push you from unplayable to something that's playable. That's why having potent hardware certainly is important. On the other end of the coin, it's also a positive that Nvidia is at least pushing all of these different technologies to try to make the GPU experience better. At the end of the day, regardless of the price and some of the reduced specs, we're certainly getting some of the best gaming performance we've ever seen with, the new RTX 4000 GPUs. Likewise, AMD with their 7000 series GPUs as well. We're seeing some impressive performance. We're seeing some new technology develop. While we don't know how heavily accepted technologies like DLSS 3 and FSR will be, at least for now, they definitely improved the gaming experience in a lot of cases. Optimized games or not, it's a reality of PC gaming now, so it is good we're getting these technologies. I just wish that they were done on better hardware, a little bit better pricing as well, so that way we don't have to plan for new GPUs to basically be obsolete. Stuff like the 3070 Ti and the 10GB 3080 are already getting close to that point if you still want to turn on a lot of eye candy in these newer games. All right, guys, let me know what you think down below. Remember to subscribe, and I'll see you guys on the next video.